What you're watching is the famous ending to Robert Altman's McCabe and Mrs. Miller with cinematography by Vilmos Zsigmond. In this scene, we reveal John McCabe covered in snow as the lens of the camera obscures his body. Zsigmond uses the telephoto zoom to obscure the very foundation of Western mythology. The telephoto zoom was popularized by Robert Altman in the 60s and 70s. It has since gone on to become one of the most popular techniques used in film. Here we have a 62 CN E30 to 400mm zoom lens, the first of its kind. This means that the focal length capability was within 30 to 300mm. The standard capability of a telephoto zoom lens in the 1970s was between 25 and 70mm in focal length. This is the minimum range of most standard consumer zoom lenses today. Modern zoom lenses are, of course, marvels of advanced optical engineering. The demand for even more compact digital cameras has put increasingly difficult demands on the camera designers. Nonetheless, we are going to examine a very simple optical zoom lens, probably the kind that Robert Altman used in McCabe and Mrs. Miller. What we have here is the interior glass of a very typical zoom lens. So what does a zoom lens consist of? Well, it consists of two very distinct systems. So you have the zoom system and the focusing system. Now, the key element of the zoom system is the concave lens in the center, which disperses the light path and which can be moved relative to a convex lens behind it, which gathers it in again. So the function of the zoom system is only controlling the width or dispersal of the light rays entering the front of the lens, and therefore changing the magnification, which determines how optically zoomed in you are to your subject. The zoom system, however, does not actually focus the image. That is the job of the rear elements of the lens system, which focus the rays onto the imaging sensor, ensuring a sharp picture. Now, in the case of Robert Altman, instead of a sensor, which is you see in digital filmmaking, you would actually have a strip of film that would actually capture the rays of light. So in the diagram we're looking at right now, we can see the relative positions of the lens elements when the lens is set to a wide angle. In other words, the concave lens is pulled far back enough where the image itself is much wider and has a very small focal length. Now, as you can see, the path of light entering the front element of the lens is narrowed, producing a lower magnification. And as a side effect of this, it also concentrates the light entering the lens, right? And this allows all to fall on the sensor, which is why your wide-angle lens will have more of an image. Now, in this diagram, the same principles applied to the previous diagram are used here, only the concave portion of the lens is set to a very high magnification. In fact, its highest magnification, which equates to its highest focal length. The concave element disperses the light path, so only the center area of it is gathered by the rear element of the lens. This produces higher magnification since only the center portion of the image is captured by the sensor. The dispersal of some of the light entering the lens is, of course, one of the consequences of setting your concave portion of the lens to maximum magnification. The image here benefits greatly from the telephoto focal length, and of course the nostalgic abstracted quality of very early 1970s optical features on lenses.
Hey, you've got a watch on. Will you tell me the time? I'll go get
Here we have a scene from A Woman Under the Influence, where Gena Rowlands paces around a Los Angeles street. Now, the technique used here is the same technique Robert Altman used in McCabe and Mrs. Miller. That is, both filmmakers chose to use a telephoto zoom from roughly 30 to 400mm in focal length. This scene is famous for having been shot 500 feet away from the subject. A standard scene from a standard film is usually shot between 100 to 50 feet at the most. Cassavetes, however, does not adhere to this rule. Cassavetes comes from the school of naturalistic filmmaking. It is therefore in the best interest of this documentarian approach that the camera is nowhere to be seen to the point of virtual invisibility. Down by Law is arguably Jim Jarmusch's finest work, starring Roberto Benigni, John Laurie, and Tom Waits, with cinematography by Robbie Mueller. Moeller, like many cinematographers for independent directors, are no stranger to prime lenses.
Watch out for Bobby, maybe cheating.
It's no joking. Look where I am.
To review, the definition of prime lens is a lens with a fixed focal length. The variation in prime lenses are often denoted by the focal length in millimeters, the most common being 24, 25, 30, 50, and 80 millimeter. In this scene, cinematographer Robbie Mueller uses a 25 prime. One of the key factors that play into a cinematographer's choice of prime lens is location and subject distance. In the case of this scene, John Laurie, Tom Waits, and Roberto Benigni sit relatively close to the camera but in a very confined location. The lens of choice is therefore a 25mm prime, a lens with a relatively small focal length, and therefore a much wider refraction angle. It's important to understand that in any given cinematic prime lens, one will find an assembly of both concave and convex lenses placed aside from one another. This creates a complex chain of mediums through which rays refract, reflect, refract, reflect, and so on. A standard cinema lens will have about 6 different glass pieces, both concave and convex, paired next to each other. Since a ray traveling through a concave lens has a dispersed refraction angle, the focal point of the rays will reflect off of the concave lens and intersect in front of the glass as opposed to behind, creating an imaginary image. A convex lens has a converging refraction angle, causing the rays to intersect at a common focal point behind the lens, and as a result, creating a real image. A real image is denoted as such because the light rays travel towards the eye. In other words, the light seen is real, unreflected light. A virtual image, however, intersects at a focal point through reflected light rays, and therefore the light seen by the eye is merely a reflection. Reflected light, as opposed to non-reflected light, is commonly referred to as virtual or fabricated light. Because a common cinematic prime lens is a combination of concave and convex lenses, the lens distorts the rays such that the image itself is left to a sort of ambiguity. It's neither real nor virtual.
All right, quiet. Kill the noise. Let's go. Kill the noise.
And then one night, she told him that she was pregnant. She was about 3 or 4 months pregnant, and he didn't even know.
Our last film to be discussed is Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas. Natasha Kinski stands in the foreground of this shot, hearing her long-lost husband's voice on a telephone line. This is perhaps one of the most fundamentally cinematic uses of a 50mm prime in cinema. The distance between her and the camera is about 10 feet at the most. The focal length, however, ranges from 50 to 60 millimeters in focal length, creating the intimacy felt in this scene. The shot is between 3 to 4 minutes in length, leaving the audience with no emotional escape.
For 2 years, he struggled to pull them back together like they were when they first met. But finally, he knew that it was never going to work out. So he hit the bottle again.
It's somewhat indisputable that filmmaking is an art form that's highly technical, though this does not justify either divergent of discipline having superior importance than the other. All disciplines require an understanding of its fundamentals, and within the understanding of a given medium, one inadvertently catalyzes the possibility of a breakthrough.
She dreamed about escaping. That was all she dreamed about, escape. She saw herself at night running naked down a highway, running across fields, running down riverbeds, always running. And always, just when she was about to get away, he'd be there. He would stop her somehow. He would just appear and stop her. And when she told him these dreams, he believed them. He knew she had to be stopped or she'd leave him forever. So he tied a cowbell to her ankle so he could hear at night if she tried to get out of bed. But she learned how to muffle the bell by stuffing a sock into it and inching her way out of the bed and into the night. He caught her one night when the sock fell out.